2, 1. We are live.
All right. Well, if we are indeed live now, I'd better do the introductions. My name is Norm Ellis, and this is the Adult One Bible Study class for Grace Baptist Church. And we're glad you're with us online and here in the classroom. So we'll be starting in just a few moments. I got a couple things to jot down the board, so just stand by. Try not to be too distracted by all our conversations. Come on in, Tina.
Morning, Tina. How are you? Pastor, why in the Old Testament do they say to David, or David would say to the priest, your God, and not say, my God? It was most like, pray to your God. Like God wasn't, if you couldn't pray to God directly.
There was started off in the Exodus when God spoke the Ten Commandments and all the nation of Israel heard him. And it was terrifying them. And they told Moses, don't let that happen again. You talk to God on our behalf and you tell us what he said. That was terrifying. We're going to die if he keeps doing that. So their fear of God was not pure, but they trust in God. And so they basically asked for an intermediary, an in-between person. It was shortly after that God set up the priest class. And the priest class was meant to serve as that intermediary between the people and to God. So yes, people could pray to God individually, and he said he would hear their prayers, especially as they came to the temple or things like that, humble themselves. However, intrinsic within their culture was the idea that the priests are the intermediary. They help me meet God. In the New Testament, that's when we talk about the individual priesthood of the believer. Every believer is a priest. Jesus is the mediator, and he is himself God. And so the kind of New Testament, Jesus made sure to abolish that separation.
Well, hence the curtain being torn.
Right, and yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You'll see imagery that Paul uses, back in those days, Moses even wore a curtain over his face, to hide the glory of God, because even that was too much for them. So why would they do that in the Old Testament? People who were seen as closer to God, priests or prophets, they were seen to have this privileged connection that, hey, if I get you to pray for me, God's going to listen to you because you're more righteous than I am. And so why don't you ask God for this for me? And so there became that element. You'll see a lot of that even still today in Christian cultures where people have this sense of, I'll have the pastor pray for me, or like in a Catholic group, I'll have the priest pray for me, or things of that nature. Does that kind of help explain?
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out, why would they always say, pray to your God, or go to your God and pray, and I go,
Also should be your God, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our God.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes you'll see a wicked king say that. Like I think Ahab, the one time he humbles himself, he actually goes. Is it Elijah? I forget exactly which one it was. No, it might have been Elijah. He said, "Go and pray to your God on my behalf." And he humbled himself before the Lord and sought the Lord, and God actually listened to him and the prayer of Elijah. So yeah, there was this sense of the priest or the prophet is closer to God. And sometimes, again, if somebody was idolatrous like King Ahab, he worshipped multiple gods, he might very well have a pained conscience being like, he's not my God exclusively, so it's not right for me.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So depending upon the verse you're in,
I was just reading in Chronicles, and
Yeah.
and it's like, pray to the Lord your God, and it's like they couldn't just go to him themselves.
Yeah, you would expect them to do it themselves,
Yeah.
right, yeah. Chronicles often talks about the importance of the priestly class to the Old Testament spiritual life, so that also might be getting highlighted there, trying to highlight the importance of priests and the relationship that Israel had with God. The priests were supposed to be very much set apart, right? Like God even made laws like, priests can't drink alcohol before serving him. Priests have to, wear special clothing.
Right,
they have to, when you get to a certain age, you are forced to retire. Basically, I want you to be at your prime of life when you're serving and leading everyone and teaching everyone who I am. And so there were some very strict rules for the priestly class that they should, if they did it correctly, be at their top speed, so to speak, to serve.
You done? That's fine.
I think so. Yeah, you stood ready.
This
so.
theology moment was brought to you by Grace Baptist Church. Pastor Matthew
That's
Wilson.
right.
But we're going back now to the New Testament. Or forward to the New
Back
Testament.
to the New Testament. Back to the future.
Back to the future,
And
yeah.
I gotta check and see if we have a greeter upstairs. So I'm gonna be right back here.
Alrighty. Hopefully. Before you go, wait. Do something for me.
I would love to.
You keep this one and put this one in the plate for me.
I will do that.
Thank you. way I don't have to work later.
That's right. I should have done mine today.
Alrighty. Well, today we got a very good lesson. I sincerely hope we get to it. Because it's one of those lessons where I just keep going and going and going. It's like, I can't do this. I can't keep going and going and going. I have to say, stop here. But we have lots of extra verses that hopefully I will get to. And I have some to hand out, as a matter of fact. So, let me see here. Who would like a nice long one? Anybody? Any volunteers? Oh, look at that, a volunteer.
Yes.
I knew
Oh,
you would.
we need people like Could you say this one for me when we get to it? And you got one pen?
Okay,
There we go.
I'll take two.
Would you like one? There
Or
we go.
two.
Well,
Well, I
You know
got you, so is that
Maybe
fine?
David will be here, so.
that's true. I do have several others, and Matthew's going to come back. I
Oh,
think.
yes, so we might be.
So
just
we'll see what we
fine.
can do on this. But we do have some more, so we'll see 7.
You can take the next one too, Joe.
I have a short. Who would like a short one? Anybody would like a short one?
Here, he can.
A real short one?
I'll do a short one.
All right. That gives me 3 left that I can do, or somebody else. All right, good. All righty. So today we're going to be studying in Mark chapter 7. So if you have your Bibles, turn to that chapter.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to be looking at primarily our focal verses are verses 24 through 37 of Mark chapter 7. But we'll be looking at a lot of other verses, I think, because I got a bunch here. So the title is includes. So you hear the word includes. That's kind of a nice thing, you know. Batteries included. Well, that's good. That's a bonus.
Yes, it is these days.
Unless it's the word inclusion, and then that can kind of have, I don't know, mixed.
But we're looking at the positive side here.
Okay, good. All right.
But it's nice to be included, right? If you're from the outside, somebody's including you inside. It's got good ramifications for most people, right? But we're going to be looking at what this means, of course, with Jesus and those he was speaking to, and of course, us. So, if you're following along in the lesson book, we are on session number 5. It starts on page 46. Page 46. And the main idea is that Jesus extends mercy to all people. Isn't that a good thing too? All. It's just like includes, right? Well, that's because it's very similar. It's good to hear things like that, you know, that everyone can come over here. No one's excluded. Everyone can come if they want, right? That kind of terminology. So we're going to be looking at these things. And we're looking at these 3 areas. The first one is the dejected. That's in 24 through 30. The second one is the deaf. That's in verses 31 through 35. And the third part of our study is going to be the dumbfounded. And that's in verses 36 and 37. So let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and we'll jump right into it. Good to see you.
See, what did I say?
Would you like to do
I will
a
do
verse
it,
of
sir.
survey? I would appreciate that. And I think I'd give these probably to Matthew that comes back, or I'll do those. Let's have a word of prayer, and I want you to remember in your prayers Gurley Madsen. She fell and hurt herself very badly. We need to be praying for her. They're not sure she's going to make it. Apparently, she hit her head and maybe broke her hip too. She's one of our elderly saints in our church, and so please keep her in your prayers because it's just a terrible thing to have that kind of thing happen. Yeah,
She reminds me an awful lot of my mom.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah.
Yes,
her
yes.
accent is
She's
just,
such a sweet
Yeah.
woman. She's right now currently, I think, in Idaho, but she might be in North Dakota. I'm not sure. Because the word was Fargo, Idaho. But I'm not sure there's a Fargo in Idaho. But there's a Fargo in North Dakota.
Sure is.
So anyway, wherever she is, God knows.
Yeah.
So we need to be praying for her. So let's go ahead and have a word for her. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for our study today in Mark chapter 7, Lord. It's packed with very important things for us to unpack and to comprehend and apply it. And I just pray that we'd be able to do that, Lord, today. And I just pray for those that are sick today, those that we know that are infirmed. Specifically, be with Gurley Madsen right now, Lord. I just lift her up to you that you help her to heal, Lord. You help the doctors to do what needs to be done so she can recover, Lord. I also pray for others like David Nicholas, Lord, and his sweet wife to us, as she takes care of him, and others, Lord, that we know in our church that need your prayers. I just thank you so much for all you've done for us, and Lord, how you take care of our needs, and how you've included us, Lord, in your salvation plan. Thank you so much. In your Son's precious name, amen.
Amen.
So, includes, that's a nice word. We were talking about that, David, before you came in. You like the word include? I do too. I think most
military word too.
Yes, that's true. It is. And imagine that you are a first-time guest to our Bible study group, or any group for that matter. What can be some of the emotions or feelings that go along with being a first-timer in any group? Now, if you want to, what was that question again, Norm? You say it so fast. I apologize for talking quickly. I have a large amount of material, and I'm afraid I won't get through it. But on handout number 1, on the first page, you'll see the questions right there in the middle. So, what about that? What are some emotions or feelings that go along with being a first-timer in any kind of group?
Fear.
Fear, okay. Why is there fear there, do you think?
Unknown territory.
No, nobody likes to be the odd person out.
Yeah.
The newbie.
The newbie,
The
right?
newbie.
Now I remember somebody, David mentioned military. I remember when I was a newbie. They called us rainbows.
Oh.
You know why they called us rainbows?
Because you shine so much?
No. No, we were called rainbows because in our flight there was a rainbow. Everyone had different kind of clothes and stuff and hairstyles, and it was a rainbow. So the sergeants had fun of this. Says, I got a rainbow flight here, And then of course after a couple of days go by, we weren't rainbows anymore. We all had the same haircuts. I mean, they were buzz cuts. We had the same outfit, and so everybody looked the same. It was monochromatic almost, you look across. We were no longer rainbows. Now we were part of the group, part of the thing going on there. And we didn't stand out in the crowd. Nobody likes to be standing out in the crowd. Those emotions of fear is good. What's another one?
Will you be accepted?
Okay, yeah. Do I have the right clothes on? Do I smell good? Well, are people going to accept me? Acceptance is a real question. Along with fear, there's nervousness, right? Nervousness goes hand in glove with fear. How about excitement? Could there be excitement?
Can be. There can be excitement there.
Tell me how there could be excitement. And what would be a motivator for the excitement, do you think? I like the excitement one. It's not a negative one. It's a good one.
It's a new experience.
New experience? Okay. Let's say you're a new Christian and you're going into a Bible study class. And you don't know much about Bible, but you know you're saved. That God saved you, right? Isn't it exciting then to know more about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah. I was excited when I went to basic training in the Air Force. I was also scared. But I knew what I was getting into because I researched it. I'm a research person, okay? I love to research things. I was excited too because it was a new phase in my life, just like a Christian's new phase, There's doubt sometimes, right? Did I come to the right place? I'm not too sure. These guys look a little unsavory maybe. I don't know, those kind of things, right? Another emotion would be anxiety. Kind of goes hand in glove with fear too, right? You can be anxious, You're looking at your watch. Is this over yet? That's a bad tell when you see somebody looking at their watch a lot. Or looking at their cell phone, because the cell phone now is now everybody's watch. I'm an old timer. I have an actual thing on my wrist that tells me what time it is. Oh, here we go.
I do too.
Oh, look at that. We're all old timers.
But mine could answer a phone call.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Cheating.
She's some of those special people.
Special ed.
Yeah. So anyway, we have a lot of these things that are parts of being a newbie. I use that term there, right? And it says by the first century, the Jews had come to believe that they alone had the privilege of experiencing God's mercy. They were it, right? They saw themselves as God's favored people, chosen people, right? And they assumed the Gentiles, or the non-Jews, also sometimes called Greeks. Those are interchangeable terms, by the way. It doesn't mean just people from Greece. When they say the Greeks, that's another word for Gentiles. They saw themselves as God's favorite people, and they assumed that the Greeks would never experience God's mercy. Well, think about that. What an assumption that was. Because was that taught in the Old Testament by the prophets? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. They were supposed to be a lighthouse, if you will, for the nations.
I don't know how they could miss that because it included to be a light unto the Gentiles. Is that what it said?
In the Old Testament, yeah, they were supposed to be that light. Anyway, but Jesus never limited his mercy to the Jews alone. As he ministered to Gentiles and Jews, he proved that God's mercy extends to them also. His death provided the perfect sacrifice for every person, and his resurrection revealed his power over death for all. So as we look at these verses today, I want you to think about the great examples that Jesus provided on how the good news is for everyone, anywhere. Who are the Gentiles in our world today? Now, remember what Gentiles were. They were the what?
The Outsiders.
The outsiders.
That was
They're
a
not part of
great
us.
movie.
Yeah. That's an old movie.
Yes.
Old book, actually.
Yes, it is.
But anyway, so what would that feel like if you were in that kind of situation? And the Jews were the only people that had God, and you couldn't, you thought. Would that be a good feeling or a bad feeling?
Not a good feeling at all.
Not a bad, not a
Regardless
good
of the
feeling,
subject
right?
matter,
Right.
you know, you're going to this place or
Right.
whatever, and you have these. Okay, will they like me? Do
Mhm.
I like my shoes?
Mhm.
You know, have the right color of hair. You know, all these things
Uh-huh.
that goes through your brain. You know, or probably a good rumor. Well, this Hollywood person's going to be there. Will they shake my hand? You know what I mean? Am I right in the right kind of clothes?
Yeah. So, and don't let me forget this, by the way, but David had an excellent example a few weeks ago where he talked to me about us getting together and maybe having like a meal sometime. So talk to me later about that. We'll get more rolling if you're still thinking about that, okay? Anyway, I'm saying it now so I don't forget. My brain is so packed with junk right now that I'm trying to undo things and something else pops up so I remember. Anyway, so Jesus provided good news. That the good news is for everyone everywhere. So who are those Gentiles in our world? That's the question. Who are the Gentiles in our world?
Non-believers, people who aren't following Christ.
Okay. Now, remember, it's an attitudinal thing that we look at people and see, and sometimes we see it, they're reflected like that, right? So sometimes, maybe we even tend to look at those unbelievers as Gentiles, right? Yeah. So, but remember, the Gentile, another word for the Gentile was the other. I forgot to mention that. We're Jews. That's the other. Wow, think about that.
The other what?
Non-Jew. They're not part of us.
They're
They're the other. Anyway,
Yeah.
but so what is there some people, groups, some things maybe in our world today that are looked at that way as the other? Kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago too, I think.
Yeah, homeless.
We talked about homeless people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we look at them that way. It's not good to do that, folks, but we do, don't we?
Yeah.
Drug addicts, perhaps. The wino in the street. Any others that come to mind? Maybe different ethnic groups.
I know one. We don't really give that much credit. That outsiders is the wealthy. They feel like okay,
Wealthy?
Yeah.
Well, and there's that aspect too. Yes.
They can feel. Well, you know, I got all this money.
And we can look at them that way and say, well, they're not like us. We work for a living.
Yeah.
You know, there's that mentality. Now, I kind of, in the military again, we joke about that. We talk about the non-commissioned officers, the enlisted, and then there's the officers. And so when somebody says, were you a pilot? Were you an officer in the Air Force? Says, no, I work for a living. You have to experience that to know what I'm talking about. I think David and Steve understand that. I'm not an officer. I work for a living. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, all those kind of cute things. Anyway, but we do that, don't we? We do that. We categorize people. It might be by social status, economic status, ethnicity. Maybe I'm more learned than you, so I look down upon you, or something like that, or vice versa. You think you're something tough. I'm not going to associate with you because you're one of these people up there somewhere. We do it all the time, is what I'm getting at, right? So we got to watch out for that. Did they do it? They did that in the first century? Of course they did, because we're talking about that. Of course they did. So we got to be aware that we don't act like the Jews of the first century and treat everybody like the other. And that's not a very good thing, is it? Not a good thing. So, introductory paragraph. Most people have at least once experienced being excluded. Have you ever felt that experience before? Oh, I have. It's not a good feeling, is it? No. Feeling like an outsider is an emotionally painful experience. Whatever the reason for being excluded, the incident typically stays in our minds for a lifetime. We don't forget that, do we? They say that when you have an experience, if it's a positive experience, you might not always remember it, but a negative experience, you never forget it, and that's true. So being included, though, in a group or event, it can be more obviously positive or life-giving. In the same way, the memory of belonging can remain with us a long time, too. It's just that sometimes those negative things try to crowd out those things. I found that out in my life, too. That's why it's important, if you don't do this, to journal. Now, I use the word journal, and somebody's going to say, what's a journal? What are you talking about? Journal or journaling means you write stuff down in your life when it happens. Why would you think you should do that? Positive and negative things, by the way. As a Christian, why would that be a good idea?
I guess you want to keep track of things, events that's happened in your life, and you do it because you may not see yourself as doing those things, and you want to keep a record as it progresses, and you can say, "Yeah, I'm here, I've done it," or I've helped that person.
Yeah.
Or how often do we think, okay, this is gonna trash my life forever.
Yeah.
Whatever, right? And then you look back on that 6 months later and you went, oh, God was there. He helped me.
Yeah.
So those are the things, you want to remember. That's.
I have an update about Gurley. I misspelled her name. It's not L-Y, it's L-I-E. Gurlie.
Yeah.
She went to Lisbon, North Dakota, and she was being transferred to Fargo, North Dakota. So that's where that kind of thing came in. Sorry, I didn't mean to digress too badly here, but I also need to turn off my phone. There, now it's off. Okay, so that's exactly right, though, what you said. That's good. We don't. When you journal, you remember. It reinforces. Now, you might say, well, why should I reinforce a negative thing? Because in a Christian life and walk, you learn from experiences, right? Sometimes those things are negative, too, in our life. And when you write these things down, and then you see how God used that to create in you maybe a tender heart for that particular area, it reminds you that you need to do that throughout life. I'm not good at journaling, but I have written down some things, and if you go back and look at them, it's amazing to see how, that was a real hard time in my life, but look what God did afterwards. It's an amazing thing how God takes care of those things in our life at those times. So where was I? Did I finish that thought?
You got the paper.
I know.
Hopefully, because you said you were
Yes, I did
going to
finish
be
it.
out of time.
I did finish it. Good. Anyway, so we do have some handouts today, so make sure you observe them as we go through the lesson at times. There's a key doctrine. It's also in your lesson book about man, and it says the sacredness of human personality is evident in that God created man in his own image, and in Christ, that Christ died for man. Therefore, every person of every race possesses full dignity and is worthy of respect in Christian love. And that's taken from Genesis 1 and Revelation 7. You can see that. Excuse me. The next thing in our introduction is, when have you felt most like an outsider? It's kind of a rhetorical question, I know. But is there anything anybody wants to share? You can. But there are times when you feel that way, don't you?
When I was in college, I took they called it interpersonal communications class. It was a sociology credit.
Right.
And we didn't have a written final. There was a list of things that we could go to, and then we had to come back and tell. Well, one of them was we had to go to a church that was in a black community.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted us to feel as the outsider.
Oh, interesting.
So I found a Baptist church, right? Went to the Baptist church. Did I feel like an outsider once I got there? No. But I had those feelings.
Yeah.
I had those feelings that I was going to.
That trepidation, that anxiety,
Yes.
wondering, what are they going to say about me? Stuff.
Yes, exactly. What are you doing here?
Uh-huh.
Right? But
Yep.
yeah.
I was in the Air Force, and we went to several different locations where there was churches, and we'd go and find a local church and worship there. And so it's really interesting. The first few times you go in and do that, it's like looking at us? All those are the new people. You know, what are they thinking about me? It's kind of a weird feeling, isn't it? A very strange feeling. And if you go to different school when you're a kid, those feelings stay with you a lifetime as well. You have this feeling, oh, am I going to make friends here or not? Are they going to hate me? Oh, they're picking teams. I'm the last one they picked. Oh! You know,
Yeah.
all those kind of things, right? Gone through those many times, right? Anyway, so we have those feelings. It says, what did that experience feel like to you? It felt uncomfortable to me many times. Now, you probably felt uncomfortable at first, but then it changed, didn't it?
Yeah.
Changed to one of what? Acceptance.
Acceptance.
And new friends.
Welcome.
Isn't that a neat thing?
Yeah.
We can bond with people that we didn't know until that time.
Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling.
It's all because of Christ.
That's exactly
it.
right. Exactly right.
That's right.
So also included is a chart, and I think I've included this before on the miracles. I think that's handout number 2. If I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
sir.
Yes.
So I don't know where we are on this one here. Actually, I don't see that one. Where is it? Mark 7. Okay,
At the
yeah,
bottom?
it would be the bottom one, right? Gentile woman's daughter. That's right. The Syrophoenician woman. They didn't say that here, so that's why it didn't catch my attention. And also, I also have a song. This is a hymn song. It's He Included Me, because I couldn't help, as I'm going through this lesson, but sing that song in my head. So I said, okay, I'm going to at least have it available, so if we have time, we'll maybe do that song. If you're familiar with that song or not, but it's a really great song. Goes along perfectly with our study today. What else? Oh, we got a map, of course, up here, and I've sent that out before in the handout, so I decided to save paper and not print that. But it's showing again where he was working in different areas around the area of Galilee, and the Decapolis, and Tyre, and Sidon, all those different places. And there's going to be mentioning this in our lesson as we go through it today as well. Also, understanding the context. I want to go through that just briefly. That's on page 47. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just sort of glance around it. Some of the things we're dealing with today is ceremonial uncleanliness. Now, we don't know what that means, do we? When you hear that $10 phrase there, what does that mean to you? Most people go, I don't know. Some sort of Jewish strange laws, right?
When I didn't, before I read the Bible, found out what it was, I had no idea. I couldn't connect it together. But now I know what it meant. But I said, like, a ceremonial unclean. I know what unclean is. You're dirty.
Yeah.
But ceremonially?
And there's various reasons for it. And when God was dealing with the children of Israel, He wanted them to be a separate group to Him, to be that kingdom of priests that go out to the world. Okay, that was the reason for doing this thing. So people would say, that person's different. Why is that person different? I got to talk to them, and they would learn about God. Unfortunately, the Jewish people to do that, they kept it all inward at that time. But ceremonial uncleanness is all part of this. Like, what kind of food is clean? Sheep. You can eat, the meat from a sheep. What is unclean? Pig. You can't eat it. And there's reasons we found out today, by the way. There's something called trichinosis.
Yes.
When you eat pork that has not been prepared properly, you can get trichinosis, which is not good to get. So how about that? God had some reasonings also behind it we didn't know at the time. Anyway, going on, there's also when you did certain things, you had to cleanse yourself. And the Jewish people were very clean people from that standpoint. They would do cleanings before they did such and such, and this and this. And there was all this ritual of this. But the problem with these kind of things is also people then tend to focus on the ritual instead of on maybe the reason for it. And so they make that a priority, and that's what they did. But anyway, the Pharisees and the scribes, they criticized Jesus because of what his disciples were doing. We'll talk about that a little bit more here. But Jesus said what they were doing is they were elevating human tradition and teachings over what God's word plainly had said. So he pointed out their hypocrisy and the fact that their hearts, instead of being in tune with God, were actually far from God. Now here's the religious leaders of the day, and Jesus is saying this, and he said a lot worse things. He called them a brood of vipers. He called them sepulchres. Looks nice on the outside, and inside are full of dead bones. So he didn't really endear himself to these people, but his observations were on mark. And that's when the truth is said, sometimes it does hurt. So he revealed these things about them, that they were self-serving, these things you do. And it's interesting, they would say, well, you know, I have some property over here. I could sell it and help my ailing old parents who can't work, but you know, they'll just die pretty soon anyway. I'll declare that property Corbin. And when I do that, I don't have to sell it and help them. Now, we don't know what that means today, but it means devoted to God. Something is devoted or assigned to God. And when it's assigned to God, you can't use it for anything else, just for God. In their minds, see, they actually meant, I can keep it to myself. So when they said those things, they didn't mean them from the standpoint
So what they
of serving
said
God.
and what's in their heart was two different things.
Yes, and their heart was evil.
Yeah.
They didn't want to help their own parents. And Jesus saw this and called them out on this, and they did not like that. Anyway, says the encounter with the Pharisees prompted Jesus to address the crowds and to assert that external emphasis on the religious leaders did not address the origin of spiritual contamination. He advised them to focus on their attention on the heart from which all the behaviors flow out of. And they weren't doing that, right? And Jesus gently rebuked even his own disciples for their lack of understanding at a certain point. Expanding on his message to the crowds, the Lord enumerated several sinful behaviors. Now, when we see things like this, this list is not an all-inclusive list. He's using this as an example. What's interesting is the list basically copied off, go figure, the things in the Ten Commandments. Anyway, so he's inferring that this is ultimately a spiritual malfunction of the heart. So Jesus' disciples also basically had a certain amount of spiritual dullness. You know, they're still learning, right? So, but he wants them to learn quickly because he's only got a short period of time with them. So he's concerned for that. Anyway, so they had the feeding of the 4,000. We talked about the 5,000 already. We're not going to dwell, I think, on the 4,000 today. But basically it was a repeat of the previous miracle. And repetition is good for the soul, and that's probably what Jesus is trying to help them with. And the Pharisees approached Jesus again and demanded a sign from him. To me, that's so funny. What was he doing? What was he doing?
Feeding thousands of people.
He's feeding thousands of people. He was healing people who had withered hands and lame, had never walked, and different things, were blind and couldn't speak in front of them. And we want a sign. That's what the miracle was. The miracle is an attesting sign of the Messiah. And standing right in front of them was Messiah, and they asked him to show a sign. You understand the almost the hilarity of that. But anyway, he refused to accommodate them. He was not a trained monkey to jump up out of the box and perform a trick. He wasn't going to do that. As Jesus and the disciples traveled to Bethsaida by boat, he warned them about the insidious influence of the Pharisees. And he spoke of them as being as leaven spreads throughout the dough, you know, and so they missed it somehow. They didn't quite understand what he was trying to say there. They thought he was speaking of literal bread. So it shows how their wisdom at the time was not very good. But later on, they remembered these things. They recalled these things. Anyway, so that's just a breakdown synopsis of that those areas. And I do like to get things in context, so I was going to try to do that really quickly here. If you look at the full chapter of chapter 7, and I would like to read this, so I think I will, because it's important for our focal verses. It says, the Pharisees and the scribes gathered around him when they had come from Jerusalem. And had seen some of the disciples were eating the bread with impure hands. They had not gone through the ceremonial washing. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they carefully wash their hands in a certain way, certain time, certain amount of strokes in a certain way. It's really funny. Thus observing the tradition of the elders. Remember that the traditions were the important things here to them. And when they came from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they cleanse themselves. And there are many other things which they have received in order to observe, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and copper pots, especially. They were very clean people. But the cleanliness had become their religion in a sense, following these ceremonial things. The Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to the traditions of the elders, but eat their bread with impure hands? And he said, rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites. The people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far But in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. Neglecting the commandments of God, you hold to the traditions of men. He was also saying to them, you are experts at setting aside the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses had said, honor your father and your mother, and he who speaks evil of father and mother is to be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father and mother, whatever I have that would help you is Corban, that is to say, given to God, you no longer permit him to do anything for his father and his mother, thus invalidating the word of God by your tradition, which you have handed down, and you do many things such as that. So think about that. These are the people who are saying, you guys aren't good enough for God. They're the ones that are saying, you people, you're the other. Yeah, it's us. Interesting here, okay? So, it says, after he called the crowd to him again, he began saying, listen to me, all you understand. There is nothing outside the man which can defy him, man or woman, if it goes into him, but the things which proceed out of them are what defile the man. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. When he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples questioned about this parable, and he said to them, are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that whatever goes into the man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go to his heart, but into his stomach, and is eliminated. Thus he declared all foods clean. And he was saying, that which proceeds out of the man, that is what defiles the man. And from within, out of the heart of man, proceed evil thoughts, fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. Again, that's not an exhaustive list. That's just some of the things, right? So, he didn't say, whatever, I can do that. No, sorry, you're not covered by that excuse. You're doing what the Pharisees did, right? All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man. So, when we talk about the other, or the unclean, the non one of us, the non-Jew, okay, he is basically saying, you are not following God. You, in this case, are the other. Essentially, right? Because they thought they had a lock on God, and he was pointing out that no. So unlike the religious leaders of the day, Jesus always paid more attention to what was going on inside the person, not what they were doing on their outside ceremonial washings. He was concerned about their heart, right, their soul. And I'm going to read a verse here if I can find it. Oh no, did I give it out? Oh, here it is. I got it. Here it is. Romans 10, 12 through 13. Now, this is not in the lesson book. This is free. Don't charge.
Okay.
Romans 10, 12 through 13. And by the way, it's also, I think, on our handout. I think it's on page 2 of the first handout. There's some other verses. It says, there's no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, abounding in riches for all who call on him. For whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Which I think is an Old Testament quote, by the way. And so Paul is in agreement with Jesus here, I think. Let's look at our verses. First one is the dejected. In these first 7 verses, I want you to notice who Jesus, wanting a break, how Jesus, who wants to take a break, though, is putting instead the needs of others first. Who's got number 1?
I got
Go ahead.
Jesus got up and went away from the region of Tyre, and when he had entered a house, he wanted no one to know of it. Yet he could not escape notice. But after hearing of him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syro-Phoenician race, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he was saying to her, let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to take a children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. And he said to her, because of this answer, go. The demon has gone out of your daughter, and go back to her home. And going back to her home, she found the child lying on the bed, the demon having left.
Wow. A lot of things here to unpack on this one. By the way, that's one of those terms I really hate. Why am I using it? A lot of things to look at here in this one. First of all, what is the context of this? We talked about this already, right? he had fed the 5,000, and later he fed the 4,000, right? And he had this interchange with the Pharisees, and he pointed out the fact that you're the defiled ones. You're accusing my disciples and of being defiled. You're looking at the non-Jew, and you're saying they're defiled. Who's really the defiled ones here, if you want to get down to it, right? And so all this has gone on, and so he's coming in this area called the Decapolis. No, this area of Tyre and Sidon's out here somewhere. The Decapolis area, which is a pagan area. He's like going to a very strange route to get back to here again. Why did he do this? He says Jesus traveled to Tyre and Sidon, where he cures the afflicted daughter of the Syrophoenician woman. And like I said, Sidon's right near the Tyre area, if I remember right. Why would a Jewish rabbi go to that area?
A traditional Jewish rabbi wouldn't do it,
You're right about that.
but the Christ would.
That's right. He is going to the, quote, other. Isn't that interesting? So the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and all that stuff, they can't stand this. He's a person who's teaching with authority. He knows all these things about their religion. He knows their heart. Yet he's talking to those others, those defiled ones, right? How dare he do that? So some think that Jesus was insulting the woman in this passage, but he was actually explaining his mission, as we see here. So let's look at these verses. He got to this region, and he meets this woman, because this woman heard that he was here. She came to him, by the way. She heard he was there and came to him. And one of the other gospel accounts says she fell at his feet, I believe, too, because she knew who he was. She had heard. She had a daughter who had no hope. Can you imagine going through that kind of thing? Had no hope. This daughter who was demon possessed, and she only knew of one person who she's heard of that can help. This person from the Jewish race that they're not supposed to talk to. And so what kind of taboos did she break by coming there and he break by talking with her? I already spilled the beans on one of them. So she was a what? Syrophoenician. Now that's his fancy way of saying somebody from Syria. She's probably of Phoenician background and a Greek background, but the text lends it to think it was like an enclave of Greek people that lived in the Syria area. So she was born in the Syria area. So it's hence the funny name, Syrophoenician. Like it says, one of these $10 words. That's all it means, though. And so she broke what taboo? She did what?
She approached him.
She approached him. Okay. Do you do that? Why would it be a bad thing to do?
Gentiles didn't do it, but especially a woman.
Okay, let's talk about one of them first.
Okay.
She's a woman. No, you're right. Is a woman supposed to approach a man in this situation?
In that culture,
No. Unless it's your wife that's approaching you, those kind of, or your mother, that would be a taboo right there. Second thing is, I think you mentioned it also. She's a what?
Gentile.
She's a Gentile. She's the other. She's not a Jew. And he is a rabbi. A rabbi has a standing. In other words, he has what's the word I'm looking for? It would be like an officer in the military. Just love my comparisons, don't you? They didn't do certain things. They didn't grab the wrench and turn. That was no. You get somebody else to do that. That's what it usually is. So for her to do this would be unseemly. For her
She
to
heard of his authority and power.
yes.
That was.
Yeah.
So Jesus was breaking barriers left and right. And this one barrier, which would normally not be broached, she broke it because she knew he was helping all kinds of people in that area.
And she was desperate too.
And she was desperate. Yeah.
She was very desperate.
So she knew that the only person she's ever heard of who could heal this was this man here. And here he was, probably in her town, and she was not going to be denied. She was going to take her plight to the master that she was visiting. Did you think about that? It's an amazing thing. It says, this particular one does say she fell at his feet. And the woman was a Gentile. And she kept asking him. Now, this is in the form of of Greek where it was an ongoing thing. She didn't say one thing, oh, hey, hi, Jesus, could you heal my daughter? No, it was like, I need you to heal her. Please heal her. I've come from such and such. I need you to do it right now. She has no hope. Please heal. It was like a beseeching thing. This is the way this is phrased. She kept asking him. So what was a characteristic of her that we can admire? Persistence.
Tenacious.
Yeah. She was persistent. She was tenacious. She was not going to leave there until he healed her daughter. Fascinating.
Jesus knew her heart.
Well, yes.
So
Thank you.
he knew.
That's exactly right. And we forget that sometimes. Remember, he understood when the Pharisees were even thinking among themselves. He understood what their thoughts were. Because Jesus is deity, right?
Well, they wanted to send her away.
Yes. The disciples were saying, send him away. But she kept at it. So that persistence is an interesting thing to me. And he said to her something that it's been misunderstood by some people. But what did he say in verse 27?
Let the children be
children be-
satisfied first.
Wow. That's an interesting thing. He didn't sound very compassionate there, did he? Well, like somebody had already pointed out, he knew what was on her heart. And this was I think it was a tactic of his to see her complete the path to. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say she was probably also used to being ridiculed. So
Yeah.
by him calling, saying that to her,
Yeah.
that was just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that she was a woman, but she was of a different race, culture,
Mm-hmm.
and the Jews have just called them everything plus.
Also doesn't say anything about a husband, so we don't know
Yeah.
if she was married or not. But it could be a curious thing there as well. Where's her husband? Yeah,
She had nothing to lose.
She had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
she had nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus was doing something, I think, to cultivate something within her.
Maybe they got her thinking.
Got her thinking.
Yes.
What did she then express in him? It starts with an F.
Faith.
Faith. There we go. Faith. And this is something that I think he did on purpose. Okay. But if we look at these, he says there's also other reasons behind it. He says, where was it? What verse was I on? Oh yeah, verse 27. And he said to her, "Let the children be satisfied first. It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." Now, he's calling her a dog. No, this is like a mini parable. Yes, dogs were not things that the Jewish people liked, okay? And a lot of times they'd use that in a derogatory term. But when I was reading through this, it was saying that the way it's being used this time is like a household pet. And so did the Jews have household dogs as pets? I don't know. But the pagans probably did.
Yeah.
It was probably a common, dogs were common. There was dogs around there.
Yep.
And he was familiar with the fact that they had household pets. So what he's saying here is first the children get fed. After they're satisfied, then you can feed the pets. See what I'm saying? So he's not really insulting her, but he's showing her what? Form. Okay? But she will not be put off. This is just great. He uses this example. But she answered him and said, "Yes, Lord, but even those pets under the table, they get to be fed from the children's crumbs." So she's saying what there?
She's not exalting herself.
No, she's
She's
not.
humbling herself
She is.
tremendously.
And she's
And exalting him at the same time, exalting Christ
yeah,
and recognizing his deity.
his authority over everything,
Yes.
right? Yeah. She's saying that only you can do this. Can I have some crumbs? Think about that. She's not asking for the crowns. She's asking for the crumbs. Here, you were gonna say, Dave?
I was gonna say, I also see, she said, "Eat at the table, the children's crumbs."
Uh-huh.
Jesus was a child of Abraham. And what do children do when the dogs come to the table? Children.
Sometimes feed them on the table. Yeah.
I did it to my dog.
Only the stuff I didn't want,
Mhm.
like the green beans.
Now we're fall into a little bit of,
I know,
of
I
a,
know.
what they call a fallacy here. We're connecting our experience with what that is. We're not sure that's true here, but they probably did. Kids are the same. That could very well be. But she's pointing out something here.
Yeah.
She's saying that I deserve it too. I deserve this, these, even just the crumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said to her, because of this answer, go. The demon has gone out of your daughter. Now, did she say, okay, Lord, can you come and touch him in a special way and say, pray? She went and saw the healing had been done.
Yeah.
So what did she exhibit? By going to him and imploring him and then going and going home.
Tremendous faith.
Faith. Yes,
Yes.
faith. Exactly right. And now, in another translation, where was I in this thing? Oh, yeah, number 2. Who's got number 2?
I got number 7.
Okay, just a moment. I want to make sure I didn't skip something here. Okay, some also think that Jesus may have been insulting, but what he actually does, other theologians believe, is he was explaining his mission. What was his mission as Messiah? What was he going to do? In the mission, it takes steps to go through a mission. What was the first step?
Spread the word to Gentiles.
Spread the word to
Gentiles. Everyone.
Jerusalem,
Jews
Samaria, and the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
So that was like the formula, to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles. That was the formula, if you want to do. It doesn't mean the Gentiles are any less important. It didn't mean
Yeah.
that. But he wanted to give God's chosen people that opportunity to do what they're supposed to do. Okay? Now we know that he was rejected by them. He knew that was going to happen as well. But he wanted to make sure they had that opportunity. So this is kind of the formula in another version. Okay? Because the children are who? The Jews. The dogs are who? Everyone else. Everyone else. Right. So this is like first the children, then the pets. Okay. So in other words, that's what he's trying to say. And that could be true. I don't know, but it kind of makes sense in a way. But he wants mainly to cultivate that faith in her, and he says something very important here. And I don't know which verse it is off the top of my head, but I did give it out. So I'm going to have who's got number 2. Is that me? No. When do you guys have number 2?
I got number 7.
Steve. Hey, Steve, you got number 2 for me, I think?
Yeah.
Could you read that one? Mark 7,
Yeah.
18 through 19.
And he said to them, are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that whatever goes into a man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach and is eliminated?
Mhm.
They say declares no food clean.
And that was the one earlier. So he declared all foods clean. Okay? Can you keep that in mind as we go to the next verse? Acts 10, 9 through 16. Who has that one?
I do.
Go ahead, read that.
On the next day, as they were on their way to the approaching city, Peter went up on a housetop about the 6th hour to pray, but he became hungry and desiring to eat. But while they were making preparations, he fell into a trance. And he saw the sky opened up, and an object like a great sheet coming down, lowered by 4 corners to the ground. And there were in all kinds of 4-footed animals and crawling creatures of earth and the birds of the air. A voice came to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything unholy or unclean." Again a voice came to him a second time, "What God has cleansed, no longer considered unholy." This happened 3 times, and immediately the object was taken up into the sky.
So we have these unclean animals, and Peter's told, "Arise, kill and eat." I'm not going to do that. They're unclean. They're the other, by extension, right? Let's look at the next verse here, and that's 24 through 28 of the same chapter. Number 4. Who has number 4?
I do. On the following day, he entered Caesarea, and now Cornelius was waiting for them and had called them together his relatives and close friends. When Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter raised him up, saying, "Stand up, I am just a man." As he talked with him, he entered and found many people assembled. And he said to them, "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a man who is Jew to associate with a foreigner or to visit him, and yet God has shown me that I should not call any man unholy or unclean."
Interesting. So Peter's struggling with this too. That's an unclean person. This Cornelius guy. He's the other. But what did God tell him? No, I've made it clean. I've made it clean. So and then let's look at 5. Number 5, Matthew 15:21-28. Who has that one?
I have that.
Go ahead.
When Jesus left there, he withdrew to the area of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region kept crying out, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David."
Okay, just a second. I forgot to tell you, this is a parallel account in Matthew. But go ahead. That's what I wanted to do.
Yes.
Go ahead.
"My daughter is cruelly tormented by a demon." Yet he did not say a word to her. So his disciples approached him and urged him, "Send her away because she cries out after us."
She's a bomb.
Yes, he replied, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came, knelt before him, and said, "Lord, help me." He answered, It isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." "Yes, Lord," she said, "yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Then Jesus replied to her, "Woman, your faith is great. Let it be done for you as you want." And from that moment, her daughter was cured.
Wow. That's just hits you between the eyes here. You can take all those together and realize. And this particular one, I want to bring it up because it says she had what kind of faith?
Great.
Great faith. Great faith. Luke chapter 7, verse 9. Who is number 6?
I've got it.
Go ahead.
Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled at them, the centurion, and turned and said to the crowd that was following him, "I say to you, not even in Israel have I found such great faith."
Wow. Now, you got to understand the impact of this. In Israel, in other words, the Jewish people don't have this great faith. Here's this pagan man, the centurion, who came to Jesus and said, "I have a servant girl who's dying." You know, he says, "Okay, I'll go to her." "No, you don't need to go. Just say the word." And Jesus did. And she was healed. And he said about him, "Great faith again." These are 2 examples of non-Jewish people and their great faith. Think about that. Think about it. And Jesus called them out on it. Said, "You have that great faith." Isn't that neat? So I know I spent a lot of time on it. So let's go on. Death. Oh, no! Let's read the next verse here. And as we do, I want you to notice how the deep empathy Jesus expressed for this deaf man. It's another example of touching a person in an intimate way who's considered unclean. Okay? Unclean. Who's got number 7?
I have.
Go ahead.
I have it. Again, he went out to the region of Tyre and came through Sidon, the Sea of Galilee, within the regions of Decapolis. They brought him one who was deaf and spoke with difficulty, and they implored him to lay his hand on him. Jesus took him aside from the crowd by himself and put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, he touched his tongue with his saliva and looked up to heaven. With a deep sigh, he said unto him, Ephphatha, that is, be open. And the ears were opened, and impediment of his tongue was removed, and he began speaking plainly.
Sorry about that. That's good one of those big words there.
Yeah.
I trip over them all the time. The Ephphatha.
That's 2 F's.
It's like 2 F's. But anyway, it's Aramaic. It's for be opened. So here's probably also a non-Jew, right? In this situation. And he's come to Jesus for healing. Actually, people brought him there, right? And what does he do? Okay, stand over there. You're a non-Jew, so I'll be over here, and I'll
Maybe I'll get to you.
He doesn't do it. He gets close he shows that this person is not unclean to me. He touches him with his hands, puts his hand in, touches his ear, takes saliva and touches his tongue. Now this is all symbolic. He didn't have to heal that way, obviously, we know that. But he did it to show the people, the Jewish people that was traveling with him, by the way. There was quite an entourage, because a lot of these people that he had fed earlier were following. And they were seeing all this firsthand, that this Jewish rabbi is touching this man, this unclean man. Anybody who was sick like this was considered unclean, by the way. They were not to be touched. They were to be stand back from me type of thing. And Jesus came right up close and personal. So again, he's showing what? This person is accepted to God. Right? I don't want to go too quickly in here, but notice the deep sigh he had. Why do you think he did that?
I read that, I can't remember.
In verse
It was-
34, it says, and looking up to heaven with a deep sigh, he said, Patha, that is, be opened. What would that show that he had for that?
He was acknowledging the Father or seeking strength or
Yeah,
the
that's true.
Father. Lord, Father, you're needed. You know, I don't know.
The need is great.
Yeah.
And this person here is so afflicted. And do you think it touched him in a personal way?
I believe it did.
We should be touched that same way. When somebody is before us that needs healing of the heart, and we have the ability to do that, we can share the gospel with them. We should have that same deep empathy. Even if the person is an other. Okay? A non one of us. We need to include them. Include them. And that's the whole idea of our study today, right? We need to include people like this. And we see the significance of Jesus' route. All these people were excluded people. He went to all these areas that were excluded by the Jews. He went to them instead. Remarkable, isn't it? Remarkable. Let's see. It rang the bell, so I got to get going. But a lot of good stuff in that one as well. It's a smaller thing, but we can understand where they're coming from. The same idea. Jesus again demonstrated compassion towards all people by healing this man. However, he also gave the man an unusual command. We're going to read next. On the last one, it's called the dumbfounded. 2 verses left. We can do it. I know we can. We see Jesus repeating a familiar command, but they ignored it. Who's got number 8? Oh, I do. It says, and he gave them orders not to tell anyone what he'd just done. But the more he ordered them, the more widely they continued to proclaim it. And they were utterly astonished, saying, he has done all things well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. There they are watching it with their own eyes. Right in front of them, this other has been healed by a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi. Wow. Was he breaking barriers?
Absolutely doing it.
The more Jesus did what, the more the crowd did what? The more Jesus did what? What did he tell them?
Keep it quiet.
And what did the crowd do instead?
They proclaimed
They
it.
proclaimed it.
As much as they
It's a really
could.
little thing.
Yes, he did, didn't he? And this is sometimes, people are kind of wondering, why is this? Why did you say, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone? There's several examples of this. One person was healed, he said, don't tell anyone. Go instead to the temple and see the priest. Let them see that your leprosy is gone.
Gathering man, the man that cast out the demons.
And the demon also, there's been several like this. This is sometimes called the messianic secret. Why would Jesus do this? Well, one explanation is, what happened when people were talking about it? What happened then?
You had more people. Yeah.
They would mob him. He couldn't hardly move because of all the people. So would that be effective for him or not as effective probably?
Well, effective, but then not.
Yeah. So that's why he would make them all sit down in front while he'd be on a hillside so he wouldn't be so crowded and then he could speak to the crowds. But many times he wasn't able to do that because everybody needed so much from him and he would be exhausted. So that's one of the reasons why they think he would say that. But also, it says in some ways the expectation of miracles and healing would distract people from Jesus' primary message also. So that's true, right? Everybody comes to see the show, they're not listening to the words, right?
Yeah.
So his command was designed to keep their focus on the main thing, So, the last 2 verses, Isaiah 29:18, this is Old Testament, right? On that day, the deaf will hear words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind will see. So we see that illustrated, don't we? I know I'm over, I'm sorry. We see that illustrated, that what would the Messiah do, according to the Old Testament? Exactly what Jesus was doing. Right? Exactly right. So it was a sign that Messiah would do this from the Old Testament. James 4:6, but he gives us a greater grace. Therefore it says God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Can spiritual pride sometimes be a barrier between us and God? Yeah, we need to remember that as well. Remember our main point also. Jesus extends mercy to all people. That all is what we're talking about today. That all includes us when we're struggling and need His help, but it also includes others around us. Jesus set the example,
I've seen you.
and we are called to be His hands and feet as we point people towards Him. So 3 things we looked at. Christians should offer the hope of Jesus to social outcasts, the people who are not part of us, the other. We should make them part of us, right? That's the first point. Second, Christians must show individual care to people with physical challenges. If people around us need help physically, we should help. Did Jesus do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before people can listen, they have a physical need sometimes, don't they? They need to be fed first before they can listen. Things like that, right? Third point, Christians must remain focused on redemption provided to all through Jesus alone. And that's, of course, the main thing we're talking about here. There's a lot of people around us that are social outcasts, they're untouchable, they may have disabilities, whatever they are. Our challenge is to find specific ways that we can be intentional about demonstrating mercy of Jesus to all people. Just like Jesus did, we can't heal, I know that, but we can help, we can comfort, we can fill physical needs sometimes. We need to do that when possible, at the same time sharing the gospel message. That's what Jesus did. Any comments or questions? I know I had to finish up quick.
I know, you had.
They rang that bell on me. Shame on them. So let's have a word of prayer. Our Father, just pray for wisdom, Lord. Pray for wisdom and discernment and direction, so we would not miss opportunities, miss these divine appointments to minister in people that are in these situations, and to include others that maybe we might not think of as being those that we should talk to. But Lord, give us that courage to see these things and insight as well. Thank you so much in Jesus' name. I didn't get to the hymn. We're still going to do it
Okay.
as you leave if you want. I am so happy in Christ today that I go singing along my way. Yes, I'm so happy to know and say Jesus included me too. Jesus included me. Yes, He included me. When the Lord said whosoever, He included me. Yes, Jesus included me. Yes, He included me. When the Lord said whosoever, He included me. There are 3 more verses. You may take us home and sing them later, because we're dismissed.
We'll sing it later, Joe.
Thank you for being with us today. This is Grace Baptist Church. My name is Norm Ellis. Glad you were here with us. Please stand by for the next hour. Pastor Matthew will be bringing the message. God bless you all.
That was great. I'm sorry you had to rush. No, thanks. Have a good day.
Yeah.
That was rush right there.
See y'all later. Bye.
Bye. See you later.